maybe we should check in on Eddie Marsan.
Yes, yeah. So, frustratingly here, and partially related to what we're about to discuss, Eddie Marsan has protected his tweets.
Yeah, he's locked his account.
He's locked his account.
Arsehole.
Like a coward.
Yeah, melted.
Take the heat.
Yeah.
Melted.
Yeah, and I think that is related to what he was basically getting ripped on for yesterday.
I think this is probably it will be because people are digging up all his past tweets where he makes really dodgy. Like I don't think any of them were like that hateful or whatever, but just kind of like idiotic foot in mouth tweets about like Jewish people and stuff.
Yeah, it was edgy humour, not intended as punching down, but kind of doing that in some of them, just through ignorance, basically. Very much sort of people of this religion do this, people of this religion are more like this, you know? Ironically, given how David Baddiel's been all over the fucking discourse in recent weeks.
Like a rash.
One good thing David Baddiel has done in his life is, obviously he is a Spurs fan. They have long had a reputation as a club with more Jewish support than other big British teams, and there was a long-term thing where both their own fans, to sort of reclaim the word, and other fans to insult them, would call them an anti-Semitic slur that begins with Y. Eddie Marsan is apparently a Spurs fan, and there's tweets of him like defending his right to use it because he is a Spurs fan, not obviously because he's Jewish, because he isn't. And it's both very dodgy and something that even David Baddiel recognises the flaws in it and has campaigned fairly successfully against it.
Oh yeah, in 2013, Eddie Marsan tweeted, "As a non-Jewish Spurs fan, I'm confused now about the Y word. I just want it to just want to disappear." I guess he just wants to disappear, not he wants the word to disappear. Next time down the lane, I'm wearing a niqab.
Oh, for fuck's... There was me thinking, maybe that's the point where he started learning and growing quite a few years ago now. And then that punchline. Wow.
Comparing
Brilliant.
Charlie Hebdo cartoons to anti-Semitic Nazi propaganda doesn't hold up. Jews are a race. Islam is a religion. Fair game for ridicule. Just laying out those hard anti-Islam truths.
Yeah.
Here he does,
God.
you know, in Gran Torino, where Clint Eastwood's like a Mexican, a Jew, and a coloured guy walk into a barman says, "Get the fuck out of here." Like, he basically does his own version of that.
Yeah.
Hashtag racial stereotypes, which is always a good way to start a tweet. An Asian, an Italian, and a Jew all started talking about their mothers, and they realised it was the same woman.
Jesus Christ. There's another one as well. Not quote tweets, he manually retweets someone, which was a thing before you could quote tweet. Someone else saying, "Terrence Howard, fucking brilliant actor, like a black Eddie Marsan." And he's quote tweeted that with the comment, "My wife should be so lucky."
But he'd be like, nah, mate, I'm the black Eddie Marsan.
Yeah, and that's a bit sus to say the least at the first time.
Yeah. Hashtag racial stereotypes.
People had actually dug up an old article where someone was accusing Terrence Howard of having a small dick anyway. So he's both owned himself and been racist. It's quite impressive, really.
Nice. I've just requested on Twitter to see if anyone screenshotted the Eddie Marsan thread before he
I've
locked
got part
his
of
account. Okay, well, yeah, because we should talk about why everyone was digging through Eddie Marsan's past tweets.
So, I guess that the first background is Jeremy Corbyn's brother Piers, who has always been a pretty absurd figure. He's gone down some pretty unpleasant conspiracist routes before Corbyn became leader. I don't know how long he's gone off the deep end, but COVID has accelerated that, shall we say. He's quickly become a figurehead, certainly in London, for the sort of extreme anti-lockdown, anti-COVID, COVID is false, or COVID is a planned by Bill Gates and all this nonsense, you know.
Yeah,
and,
nice man actually. When I met him at the anti-COVID Van Morrison benefit concert. Sorry, the pro-COVID anti-lockdown. No, I actually did meet him and found him to be quite a nice guy in 2016 at a Corbyn rally. I said solidarity to your family, and he gave me a hug. But no, I was aware of his views on, say, climate change, views that have always been well regarded by some of the leading figures of British politics, such as Boris Johnson. I was aware that he was a climate change denier fully at that time even, and I've never agreed with him on that. His brothers never agreed with him on that. Let's get that out of the way.
Prior to all this, I think his climate was kind of a trend towards his dodgy views. He was the person that he was like a sort of freelance meteorologist, i.e. he was winging it completely. So he's the guy the Daily Express go to when they've got no headlines, basically, and they want to be like, White Christmas expected, or heatwave expected, the biggest on record, and there's no actual evidence for that. They just bring up Piers, and he's like, yes, I'll run the figures in my special scientific method. Yes, there's exactly what you want to put on the front page. Pay me. So the tabloid press, who make play of hating him, kind of help him make a living and fund all this shit. But anyway, so what he's been doing recently, which is dodgy as fuck, is he's been putting anti-COVID, anti-lockdown leaflets through people's doors. And I saw, before this shit with Marsan, people tweeting when they'd received them and the photo of the front page of it, and it's dodgy as fuck. The picture on it was essentially an even more obvious and more grim version of that mural, just sort of all the stereotypes and imagery around the Jewish bankers controlling everything, and then underneath it just some text that was like the COVID scam and all this. So pretty much everyone who's received them, I'm sure, was appalled by them. But what it's done is it's triggered a lot of the very smart centre-right people in Britain to be like, oh yeah, this is terrible, and it's also a reason for us to attack Jeremy Corbyn somehow. Yeah.
The Corbyn brothers, the new craze, as I think you were saying the other day, but more violent.
Yeah, they're known for their identical views. They're inseparable, like Barry and Paul Chuckle and other great familial double acts.
Yeah, they're a real, like, Marx Brothers, Two Stooges kind of thing.
Yes, yeah, the Craze, all the main brothers that you can think of. The Corbyn.
Nolan Liam. No, not like Nolan Liam, because they agree on everything and are totally identical in their perspectives on the world.
Yeah, in reality, the actual real relationship between Piers and Jeremy Corbyn probably is quite like the Nolan Liam one, without as much overt hostility, in that they don't really have much in common.
Yeah, I think Jeremy's a much nicer man than Noel. I just put that out.
I think Piers probably is, to be honest.
Piers probably a nicer guy.
Probably less right wing.
Well, like I say, I haven't met Corbyn. I haven't met Jeremy, but I've met Piers, and he was actually a nice person. But then that was a brief encounter, if you will. So that sounds like I shagged him.
Down to earth and very funny.
That sounds like I fucked Piers Corbyn. Anyway, so Eddie Marson's thread.
Eddie Marsan, he's no fan of the Corbyns. He's no fan of anyone an inch to his left. Anyone that wants to stick up for renters, for example. I can't find the original tweet here, but I think the original tweet was moaning mainly about Piers Corbyn, but had something about the Corbyn brothers at the end of it. And he's followed up here, and this is the bit that's really gained him ridicule. Imagine, if you will, getting in a taxi, and within a couple off minutes, the driver starts to speak in a broad working class accent. One of those working class accents they have. It doesn't sound a bit working class, it's a very broad working class accent. It could be Cockney, Brummie, Geordie, Scouse, whatever. The important thing he wants you to know here is that this person is poor. And over the course of the journey, he expresses the same views as Piers and Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, there probably are views they both hold. They probably both don't like the current government for different reasons.
Yeah, Piers does ostensibly sort of come from a left-wing background.
He holds some left-wing views in the same way.
Well, I think he thought his brother should be Prime Minister. So, I mean, make of that what you will, but, I think that's fair enough. That doesn't say too much about a person.
They both want the Tories out, but he starts off, this is a theoretical taxi driver in a broad working class accent that we're talking about, just for clarity. He starts off by saying, "Here, I had this geezer round my house the other day." That's how they talk. He reckons Jews drink the blood of genteel children. That's also how they talk. He's a lovely bloke, very honourable man, and I've just read this book that claims the Jews funded all the world wars. And my brother My brother, he spelt it Brouver.
Of course, yeah.
He reckons all this COVID stuff is bollocks. So guess what he did? This'll make you laugh. He posted a flyer around Jewish areas with the image of the Auschwitz gates on them. But instead of Arbeit macht frei, he put vaccines are safe path to freedom. He's hilarious. So he's kind of switched midway from a theoretical taxi driver who expresses the same views as Piers and Jeremy Corbyn to a taxi driver who is Jeremy Corbyn with a silly voice talking about his brother who has very specific views that are identical to Piers Corbyn.
And can we just say that when he says, oh, and by the way, my brother did this thing that Piers Corbyn, has actually done.
Did. Yeah.
That means that he's basically explicitly saying he thinks that all this stuff about Jews drinking the blood of Gentile children and starting all world wars is stuff that Jeremy Corbyn thinks, which is insane. That is those views. It would be insane to think those things, but it is equally so to think that Jeremy Corbyn thinks those things.
I think that's why he's locked his account. The other reason potentially is the one you've mentioned. People are digging through his old tweets and some of them are dodgy as fuck. But also, I was one of the people, but loads of people in his replies were saying, I'm not a lawyer, but you should probably issue some clarity on this thread if you want to leave it up, because you're basically saying views like Jeremy and Piers Corbyn, who have very different views, and then going on to say that, they're both not just anti-Semitic, but consumed by anti-Semitism. They are pushing out David Duke and Nick Griffin in the 90s stuff, Yeah, they are people who can't have a conversation about last night's television without claiming that the Jews are taking everything over.
Yeah.
You could probably say that potentially about some of the people Piers Corbyn hangs around with, but he is a distinct person from Jeremy Corbyn.
Well,
as much as they would like to pretend otherwise.
What I thought was interesting was the specific anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that Eddie Marsan attributed to taxi driver Corbyn, which was that Jews start all the world wars. Just reminded me a lot of remarks made by Eddie's co-star in the 2019 film The Professor and the Madman, or some shit like that. Looks really bad. Basically, if Sean Penn gets cast in something now, it's real low-grade stuff. But it's a film that stars Sean Penn, Eddie Marsan in a supporting role, of course, and in multiple scenes with Eddie, Mel Gibson. Now, Mel Gibson famously expressed views very similar to this fictitious taxi driver. He said, fucking Jews, this was to a Jewish police officer, the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. Are you a Jew? Maybe it wasn't a Jewish police officer, but Mel Gibson certainly wanted to know whether it was. So
classic Mel Gibsonism.
So it just made me think, was this ingrained in Eddie's head because, he and Mel had been talking on the set of that film, and Mel had been like, what do you think of wars, Eddie? I can tell you the secrets behind the wars, the behind-the-scenes shit, so to speak, in the parlance of our industry. So a lot of people are quote tweeting Eddie Marsan's tweets with pictures of him with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
I did my best to get the ball rolling on that one, because I thought it was just remarkable that the specific conspiracy theory that Corbyn does not believe in, obviously, that he chose to illustrate the views of Jeremy and Piers Corbyn coming out of a Corbyn surrogate character's mouth, was one articulated very famously by somebody with whom Eddie had worked within the last 2 years.
Yeah. No, I'm sure Eddie was challenging him every day as soon as the camera stopped rolling.
Trying
to educate and challenge him and so on. And he wasn't just sucking up to him desperately to try and get cast in the next movie as well.
Yeah. He wants to be cast in Mel Gibson's Rothschild, which he's been forced to deny is about a Jewish banking dynasty.
It's spelled slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Rothschild, not Rothschild.
As in Rothschild, yeah.
Philip Rothschild. It's about Jewish authors, actually. So yeah, Eddie Marsan's locked his account down, and I have to be honest, actually, his thread was more kind of explicitly defamatory towards Corbyn than I remembered, which is impressive because it was really explicitly defamatory of Corbyn.
Yeah, but I think, again, I hope he gets sued, because people should start getting sued for this sort of shit when they're that specific about it. But also the way he's chosen to frame it as well, with the imaginary taxi driver, you know, it's just a repeat fucking motif for these people. It's like James Bloodworth's retired miner on the bus, you know,
fire in your belly,
pulls a miserable face, you know.
You would too if you were talking to James Blood first.
Yeah, that's the believable bit of it, to be honest. But there's just this idea that you can just put any old fucking view into a fictional person you've just invented, and this then allows you to say these things and to frame these things as the views of the masses.
Yeah.
You see
it's a very definition of a straw man.
Yeah, and they've realised how often they get away with it, because they've come up with this new thing, obviously the Red Wall, a term that didn't exist a few months before the last election, but now every fucking columnist, journalist and so on has realised you can say any old shit and say, is what the Red Wall will think, is what you need to do to win back the Red Wall.
Well, the classic of this genre is that Michael Twink. I almost said like the opposite of a twink, like crusty old man Michael Crick. Michael Krusty.
No, he's called Michael Twink now. That's his name.
Krusty Crick said that he tweeted, "Oh, a taxi driver just said to me, 'Oh, you couldn't trust that Jeremy Corbyn, could you? Not when he shagged that Diane Abbott.'" It's just like, you just made this up, you fucking hammer of the left reading fucking sad sack.
Fucking hell.
You know, there's this idea, like, we on the left, we always get asked, will you condemn? We have to condemn our closest friends and so on, and hang everyone we've ever known out to dry. But on the right, it's just like when one of them does some bad shit, they're just like, just pretend it's not. Well, just ignore it. So nobody fucking called Eddie out on this shit.
Yeah.
The only, like, blue tick I saw engaging with this insane and defamatory thread was Mitch Ben, aka Bitch Men, as they'd call him if it was an FX show like The Shield. That he was defending Eddie. That was it. That was the sole, like, nobody thought, Jesus, man, I don't like Corbyn, but this has gone a bit too far. I don't think he ever said that Jews drink the blood of children and start all world wars.
People found then a previous discussion from years ago between Eddie Marsan and Mitch Ben, who obviously was very much into this new atheism bollocks, embarrassing shit, and they were just chatting away with each other about how Islam wasn't a race, so it's fine to be rude about them, and, you know, it probably reflects worse on Mitch Ben than Eddie Marsan, even though he's usually slightly less dim of the two. But what you're talking about there in terms of the general sort of omerta, really, in terms of calling out anyone with an acceptable platform. Great example of it tonight, in that after 15 years, David Aranovich has finally started to very politely disagree with Douglas Murray.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
He feels Douglas Murray's gone a bit too far with something he's saying, and he's like, come on, man.
Just a bit.
Sir.
That's not cricket.
Yeah, you wouldn't have said this 10, 15 years ago. It's almost exactly 15 years since he made the comment that life should be made harder for European Muslims across the board. So actually, he's been a massive racist the whole time.
Yeah,
and
it's
Davy
probably
Arrow
only
has
about
been
15 minutes since Aronovich said something to that effect, to be fair.
Yeah. Here we go. I think you need to take a step back from the culture wars and look at where you're headed, he says
Douglas
to Douglas
Murray, take a step
back
from
where he's headed,
is the
where he might
culture
end
war.
up theoretically if he carries down this route.
Well, that reminds me of the classic Robert Lindsay tweet to Eddie Marsan, where he's like, "Such a shame to see your slide into extreme right-wing views, Eddie. Keep this up and you'll have a column with the Daily Mail." That was when Eddie was arguing that Corbyn was a Czech spy. The funniest Eddie Marsan thing, though, was that when people were like, this thread is fucking disgusting, you don't give a shit about anti-Semitism, you fucking horrible bastard, he did another thread that was just the typical, like, pious cry-bullying shit of, you know, that classic tweet like, oh no, the trolls are attacking me simply for saying something provocative and offensive, whatever it is. But it was phrased in just the classic pious Eddie Marsan, like, just a stupid man fucking firing out these his buzzwords that he got from bad melt opinion columns. Just like, this shows that the left, just Gape's voice, this shows that the left cannot embrace pluralism and will simply demonise the other because they cannot adapt to a fast changing globalised economy in which much money can be made off properties. Like, yeah, he's just literally just such a, like, full of himself asshole. Nothing to back it up apart from some decent roles and stuff, but nothing to back up his political acumen. People were saying, does Eddie think that Mike Lee is a crank for, like, signing these pro-Corbyn letters and stuff? And it's like, I doubt Mike Lee is in any rush to work with Eddie after the way he's been carrying on the last few years.
He won't say shit. If there's a chance it might get him a role in future, he won't say shit about that person. But also, he's weird about this stuff. Do you remember when he used to have fucking flame wars with Aaron Bastani all the time?
Yeah.
And then they spoke on, I think it was opposite sides of some university debate that they'd been invited to.
Yeah.
And we're just having a nice sort of friendly chat and polite argument afterwards, and like, we don't always agree, but this just shows that Twitter's different.
Yeah,
Big fucking
man.
comedy photo with the two of them grinning. I don't think he said shit about Bastani since,
No, when we did our Eddie Marsan feedback episode, when I was like getting the clips together, I found this interview where he was talking about, it's easy to demonise the other in politics and claim something like that they believe that Jews drink the blood of children when they have never said anything to this effect. But sometimes it pays to take it down a notch. I met this bloke, we disagreed online a lot of times, we'd always been at each other's throats, but then we met and we got on perfectly, and I just knew that he was talking about Aaron Bastani. There was like no one else it could be.
He might have meant Mel Gibson, to be fair. If you look at people he's worked with, it's quite
Oh, that's a great punchline for this Eddie Marsan bit, actually. I think we should move on now.
Yeah. We've devoted far more thought to Eddie Marsan than Eddie Marsan has about any thought that's appeared in his head.
Yeah, well, just fingers crossed that Corbyn is suing him right now. Because, outrageous thread, honestly.
Yeah.
Crossed a line. He's just bitter that Jimothy made up that thing about him doing the Jimmy Savile film.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That was a rare example of people getting mad at left shit posters, probably justified in getting mad at left shit posters. And yet, a couple of months later, here he is, turned around, he's done exactly the same thing against a higher profile figure with more legal resources than him. So he's actually lost the moral high ground against a guy falsely claiming he wants to play Jimmy Savile.
The thing is, though, I think
if he didn't get the role.
I think if the money was right, he would totally play Jimmy Savile. Like, it's just the kind of role that he gets cast in. I'm sorry, like, he's played a bunch of paedophiles and murderers and creepy, unseemly elements in society. That's just his thing. That's what he does. Like,
Two separate films in which he is urinating on women against their will.
He plays like a guy who like kicks dogs to death or something. He like plays fucking.
He plays James O'Brien.
Yeah.
Fucking
he plays,
worse
exactly.
than a lot.
He plays James O'Brien. He plays Himmler. Some of history's great villains. He did actually play Himmler. I'm not making that up.
No. People were posting photos of it yesterday.
Himmler posting. To be fair, I think that's a bit of a lame gotcha. Like, you played a Nazi in a historical film. You must be a Nazi.
With villains in it that are or are close to real life villains, you've got to have someone to play them.
Yeah, exactly. Bruno Ganz put that guy on trial at Nuremberg for Downfall.
I love the fact that they got David Tennant to play a serial killer a few months ago, and they just did him up looking exactly like Robert Peston.
That's why Eddie's been in. That's why Eddie's been in such a tailspin recently. He's just so fucked off that Tennant got that job. It was like between the two of them, and Tennant was just the slightly more bankable star. Not slightly, significantly.
He knows he's too weird looking to get the Ian Huntley role, so he was banking on that one.